Many years ago, when I first met Margaret Thatcher, she had recently ceased to be Prime Minister, and my father held a small dinner party for her, and I was invited to the pre-dinner drinks. And she was talking about buying a house outside London because she'd so enjoyed living at Chequers, but she was worried about the traffic getting there. And I said to her, well, don't you have blue lights? Can't you just zip through all the red lights and do it very quickly? And she said to me, we're a democracy, in that very forceful way that only Margaret Thatcher had, that clearly she thought, and rightly so, that in a democracy you don't take grandees through with flashing lights. You only do it when it's a matter of security or a matter of state. So the recent days and weeks following Keir Starmer's difficult summer of cronyism allegations has developed further. It's alleged that senior Labour politicians and concert promotions put pressure on the police for a royal-grade blue light escort for Taylor Swift, a pop star, during her recent performances in London in August. The Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, made an absolutely feeble attempt at defending this going on while maintaining that no proper pressure was exerted on the police for Swift to receive this elevated level of security. She confessed that politicians do express their views to the Metropolitan Police. In her view, it's entirely reasonable for the joint bosses of the Police Commissioner, the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London to discuss the detailed security arrangements for high-profile events, in spite of the constitutional position that the police are operationally independent. Earlier today, Number 10 insisted that the decision to give a taxpayer-funded blue light police escort to Taylor Swift was a decision made by the Metropolitan Police, not a political one. But they didn't deny that they came under pressure from the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London. However, what we are witnessing is not just a series of missteps, but a significant distortion of political priorities. The practice turning outriders and security escorts into expensive status symbols is quite wrong. It's reminiscent of the practices of authoritarian regimes where the rule of law is disregarded for the whims of the powerful. There's an embarrassment for the Labour Party, which seems to be for sale to promoters. And it's worth remembering who received these Taylor Swift tickets. Senior Labour figures, even London's Mayor Sadiq Khan. Did he have a conflict of interest? Why is the Mayor of London involving himself in the security arrangements of a pop star, especially when the police in London have so many other more pressing authorities? The threat of knife crime continues. Another 15-year-old was stabbed in Sloane Square on Monday. The police don't bother turning up to burglaries, and a swathe of mobile phone muggings all require urgent attention, much more so than looking after the travel arrangements of a visiting American, however successful, a pop star. Moreover, this incident reveals a disturbing trend within our political culture, where people in power leverage their influence to secure special treatment for themselves and their associates. This sordid affair, this freebie-gate, illustrates how lavish hospitality does influence political behaviour. This is not merely a case of political favouritism. It is a pattern of behaviour that could easily become systemic corruption within our politics. People in power receive perks and benefits with the expectation of influence in return. Taylor Swift wanted police outriders. The football clubs worry about a new regulator, and Lord Ali wants access to the powerful. Hospitality is not given to politicians because of their sparkling personalities. The Reverend Starmer would not get much on that basis, but because people want something in return. This episode just provides the proof. As ever, let me know what you think, mailmog@gbnews.com. I'm joined now by journalist, commentator and GB News anti-hero, Benjamin Butterworth. Benjamin, thank you so much for coming in. This is pretty grubby, isn't it? Lots of freebies, and in return, the Home Secretary and the Mayor of London get in touch with the Metropolitan Police and say, this very famous pop star needs police outriders.
No, to carry on the Taylor Swift references, I think you should shake it off.
Well, I don't know any of the Taylor Swift references. I'm sure my viewers do, but they'll pass over my head completely.
Well, that's another one. You know, the truth is, I mean, first of all, we don't know the date these tickets were offered, and it's quite plausible, if not likely, in a politician's diary like Keir Starmer, they were offered a long way in advance before discussions about security took place, so that would undermine the suggestion the two were linked. But let's remember what happened just a week before she appeared in Wembley, and I was at the first concert concert reporting for Canadian television from outside Wembley, and the whole world's media was there because it was her first concert since they'd had to be cancelled because ISIS terrorists in Austria had a very real plan that was close to being executed. And it also came just a couple of weeks after somebody is alleged to have targeted Taylor Swift fans' little girls and killed them. And so there was a real sense of trepidation.
But that's something that was well known to the police and to the security services. It didn't need political pressure. And that it's the political pressure that is so surprising because the police in this country are operationally independent. It's very unusual for politicians to get involved in the minutiae of how an event is policed. And that's what makes it look suspect, that you have this generous hospitality. That creates a feeling that something is expected in return.
Well, according to the Sun's report, Taylor Swift's mother had said the concerts will be cancelled if they don't get this police security. Now, I think the concerns were rather graver than whether a hospitality box went to a few politicians. And I don't know this for a fact, but I strongly suspect Conservative politicians took tickets to that, if not other parties, because she's incredibly popular. Now, you know, the truth is that the Home Secretary doesn't have the power to tell the police what to do, and the police aren't saying that Yvette Cooper was the person who made the decision. But I do actually think it's totally legitimate that if you look at an event that's going to attract about 250,000 people, that is a significant benefit to the economy. I think it affected Sweden's GDP figures. So great was the effect of a Taylor Swift series of concerts, that they should say this being cancelled, this being deemed too risky by the star herself, is something we should do. Because bear in mind, you know, I grew up in Manchester, and not so long ago, Ariana Grande had that horrific terrorist attack.
Yes, but and there are all sorts of problems with the policing of that and the security of that. But the police are operationally independent. That's the point. It's very odd for these senior ministers and indeed for the Mayor of London to get involved with the minutiae. And the Mayor of London himself got free tickets to the concert, so of course he was personally involved. There's clear conflict of interest.
But you know what? I think that's kind of a farcical argument because I've seen the Mayor of London at many events over the years, and I suspect Boris Johnson as Mayor did the same. They're meant to celebrate a city. And in London, I think a fifth or a quarter of the population work in the creative industries. It's a massive part of London's economy. And I would just suggest, you know, I read Charles Moore's column in The Spectator last week, which was on this topic, albeit ahead of this example. And he said that if we really go for politicians in this fashion, then we are going to have ever more robotic, grey middle managers that don't, you know, if there are no perks to being a politician, if there's no comfort to that status, then who are the people that will put up with this kind of relentless criticism?
Well, I never found it necessary to take freebies.
Well, you have the advantage of tens of millions of pounds.
Well, I don't, actually. This is much exaggerate. I wish I did, and if people wish to send it in to me, I'd be only too delighted. But I think politicians have to show themselves. Caesar's wife must be above suspicion. And that this benefit in kind has shown a very grubby underbelly of politics. Keir Starmer taking £107,000 of freebies is quite extraordinary. And all the people involved want something in return. There is no such thing as a free lunch. So the football promoters, they're worried about the regulator. Lord Ali clearly loves the access that this buys him. There is an expectation of a quid pro quo.
I think Lord Ali is a bad example because he's been funding Labour politics for 30 years and been in the House of Lords for much of that. You know, if he wanted something, maybe it was a peerage, but he got that decades ago.
But access is everything, actually.
Well,
and by giving a few £1,000s to quite a wide range of ministers, he has access to them in the way that a major funder to a party has less access because he doesn't have the personal relationships. He's been quite clever in using actually not an enormous amount of money by donor standards to build up personal relationships.
Yes, although I think, you know, he has those personal relationships without the money in many cases. What I would say is that there is a legitimate question here that is bigger than the Labour Party, and that is that these are examples of buying access. So at Labour conference, it was something like £5,000 a head for a croissant with Rachel Reeves or the business secretary. Now, both major parties do that. We don't have state funding of political parties. If we took this out of the equation, then it would be taxpayers. And I think when discussing it, you have to be more honest that these are the options. And I think that ultimately our politics isn't like America. I think a lot of this makes it look more corrupt than it is, and that this is a more legitimate route.
I don't think there's anything wrong with people giving large amounts of money to political parties. I think that's clearly a better way of funding politics than state funding. I would hate to see it fall on the taxpayers. But it's when there's a catch. and when it's personal, that when it's tickets for things, that's not helping Labour get elected. That's just a freebie for a member of the Labour Party.
I don't think... And there are worse stories...
Or the Conservative Party, actually.
There are worse stories for Labour than being friends with Taylor Swift and her mother. I think that's probably not the most damaging electorally.
That was all fine until suddenly they're putting pressure on the police. And that's completely improper for politicians to put pressure on the police on operational activities. And I absolutely accept your argument that there may have been good operational reasons for it because of the terrorist problem and the ISIS problem in Austria. But the police are quite competent of dealing with that without being lobbied by somebody who's got a free ticket.
Except that at the same time, we so often see the police making mistakes. The horror show of the Ariana Grande attack illustrates that, you know, the review of that has found that there were serious mistakes made. And so I think it is more responsible than not that when politicians think there's a mistake, they should raise that concern. Doesn't mean they get their own way. It's worth noting as well that you talk about a royal escort. Well, they didn't carry guns, so they weren't operating in the same manner that they would for a prince or princess.
But I think that's because the police refused to do what they were asked to do, at least according to the Sun report, that the politicians were asking for the full-blown police escort that the King might get.
I mean, I think that, you know, I have no problem with them doing this, and I have no problem with them accepting the tickets. You know, it's not like Taylor Swift is going to get a seat in the House of Lords out of it, is it? And I do think that on a broader scale, the risk to public figures, politicians, pop stars, is much greater than it was a couple of years ago. 10 years ago, only a handful of non-cabinet MPs would have got security. Now many of them required of it because of such horrors. And I think that that is a legitimate reason for politicians to point out that the police need to catch up.
I worry it's become a status symbol. The late Queen once was coming to a Privy Council meeting when I was Lord President of the Council and was held up because she couldn't get through the traffic. The late Queen was so modest that she only had outriders when it was absolutely essential. I wouldn't have minded the traffic being held up for the late Queen at every opportunity. But for a pop star, I think it's all a bit much. Anyway, thank you very much to Benjamin